parent to think that if there are no guns around my child, that suddenly there will be a revolution and everything will be good in life, right? We also tell you that the prioritization of this parent towards his child will be on a more personal basis rather than to make a scapegoat of the child, wherein the life opportunities and like all prospects to lead like a good life in the society will be reduced for this particular child, right? Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, very proud to be on side proposition. 6 points of constructors. Number one, what is the society that we talk about, right? We tell you that the society structures as it existed in like the in the debate, which is like 1950s, we tell you that there has been like a clear superiority of the whites over the blacks. Like we tell you that every means of production, every means of employment that is like substantial, etc., we tell you is in control of the whites in the society, right? We tell you that the power structures in the society are such, and this is something that is essentially visible in the state of Arkansas. We tell you that the governor, because of the mandate that he has from the people, is against segregation. We tell you that people in society at large are such who are against the idea of segregation itself, right? We tell you that the governor goes ahead and opposes like the federal government's move because of this fact that he has mass support towards himself, right? We further tell you that because of this idea that racial discrimination is something that has been like present on a historical basis, there are two consequential effects, right? Number one, this idea that we are inferior to the whites and we don't have any means of protest seeps into the mindset of the people, right? Madam Speaker, we tell you that there is no legitimate will in the mind of this black parent who's like the main stakeholder in this debate to go ahead against status quo with a realistic possibility to win, right? To win this battle against like discrimination. We further tell you that this feeling of inferiority is legitimate because of two reasons. One, the presence of like the societal structures in the society in terms of like employment, in terms of power structure, etc., is in favor of the whites. Secondly, the extreme use of violence by the whites against like blacks is something that has to be spoken about. We tell you that this kind of idea that like if I do something, I will face not only social backlash on a psychological basis, but like actual physical harm towards like my body is something that is very grave. Right? We tell you that the parent will never prioritize these like ill effects over his own child. Right? Madam Speaker, the second area, what is the characteristic of a black parent? Right? We tell you that the black parent wants to give his or her child the best education possible. Right? Madam Speaker, we tell you that as far as possible, the best education is to win. And what is the mindset that this particular parent has? Right? We tell you that there has been a submissiveness to the existing state structures in the mind of this particular parent. Right? We tell you that side opposition has to come here and advise this particular parent who has been living in this particular society of like description for all his or her life, now suddenly feels that my child has to be like this great social leader who has to bring about a revolution. Right? Madam Speaker, we also tell you that this acceptance of inferiority is something that has seeped into the life, and also that all these social relations that this particular parent has made, of which the child is a part, is based on this particular idea that we are inferior to like the whites. Right? We further tell you that the prioritization of interest will be such that the physical protection of the child will be given priority. Physical protection of the child, no bodily harm should be caused to the child, and further that like there is no reduction of like life opportunities for this child. Right? Later after the show, we tell you that the particular black parent will never prioritize whatever side opposition is going to come and talk about over these personal interests. Right? Madam Speaker, we further tell you that why not volunteer the child for forcible integration. Right? Madam Speaker, we identify in side opposition 4 norms. Number one, what is the idea of forcible integration? Right? We tell you that due to this idea that the racial discrimination is historically entrenched in the minds of the people, we tell you that if there is forcible integration, which is basically that you come at and like point a gun at a white dude's head and be like, go and accept this black person, we tell you that there would be a reactionary behavior. Right? We tell you why is this essentially bad? Because this idea that as in the existing status quo, we tell you white people have a balance of power that is in their favor. Right? We tell you that they will have a particular problem with this shift in the balance of power if they see that if we like provide equality and all whatnot to like the black person, my stature and status in society is going to reduce. Right? We tell you that later after fifth law, we tell you that there is essentially going to be a reactionary behavior which is going to lead to certain harms. Right? Number one, we tell you that there is a possibility of a physical harm to the child. Right? We tell you that due to the presence of the violence that I've spoken about, wherein like the whites are essentially used like state structures to oppress the black, continue oppressing the black. We tell you that the frequent use of the violence by whites essentially ensures that there is a risk of violence to like the black person. We tell you that simply by the presence of marine laws, which is like side opposition's argument, we tell you it cannot be ensured that the risk to the life of this particular child is going to reduce. Right? We further tell you that there is going to be social backlash on 3 grounds. Right? Number one, what is the psychological backlash? Right? We tell you that this motion's effect is not restricted to the school environment. Right? We tell you that the backlash that this person is going to face is going to extend beyond the school environment. And how? We tell you that whenever the person goes outside the school into a playground, into a public transport system, etc., we tell you that he is going to meet the same persons as he goes to school with. Right? We tell you that the marine cops cannot be present 24/7, right? We further tell you that in any particular scenario wherein this child is alone, right, for whatever reason, we tell you that there's a grave threat of like risk to like the body of the black person, right? We tell you that essentially because of the risk of violence, it's bad for the particular black parent to prioritize like the social movement over the interests of the particular child. We further tell you that there's the reduction in life opportunities and how, right? We tell you, as in like even as I said in my context, we tell you that whites essentially own any and all means of like employment and like production, right? We essentially tell you that this black person, because he's going against like the existing status structures, the whites in society are essentially not going to give him any kind of employment in the future, right? We tell you that this essentially means that his means of employment are essentially restricted to those low paying jobs such as like running a barber shop, running like a tea shop or whatever it is, right? We tell you that any means of like having a positive relation with the whites is going to reduce because of the reactionary measure that is going to be invited, right? We further tell you that there's going to be a reduction in social circle between the black friends that he has and how, right? We tell you that because of the idea that the blacks will not want themselves to associate with like this particular black person who's going against like the existing status quo and inviting the wrath of like everyone in power in the society, essentially the whites. We tell you that the friends that he has is going to reduce, and that is something that we identify as the harm, right? Madam Speaker, we also tell you that why is it so that the move that the side opposition is going to propose is like a failed one, and the idea that the problem exists in the mindset of the people and a forcible integration will not be successful, rather harmful for the child, right? We tell you that there are two kinds of people against whom this move is like targeted, right? Number one, radical whites, right? We tell you that these are people who in their family households have been ingrained with the idea that you are superior to a white black person, right? We tell you that these people are essentially going to continue ostracizing this person in spite of the fact that he is going to have like two bodyguards around themselves in the class, right? We further tell you that moderate whites are also going to go against this black person because of the idea of vilification by association, which is something my DPM is also going to speak about, right? Madam Speaker, we also like to preempt the idea that this kind of like protest is different, any kind of protest different from like a forcible one because of this idea that you are directly interfering into the personal lives of whites in that particular classroom. For all these reasons, very proud.
Madam Speaker, we have fundamental problems with the way they characterize their case, right? They're talking about still living in a civil war era. We tell you that no, that's not how it works, right? Yes, we accept that to a certain extent there is a white supremacy, but we tell you that recent trends, especially such as this judgment that has come out, and a lot of bills and rules passed by the ex-president of Franklin D. Roosevelt and Eisenhower's policy towards blacks in the military necessarily show a change in like a larger social capital towards the blacks, right? And we will deal with that further in our constructors. But let's talk about what Iyer's idea so far has been. Iyer's idea so far has been, move will not work, current social context is chill because we all accept it inherently for some reason that has never been clarified, and therefore essentially in Iyer's status quo, blacks continue to be oppressed, blacks continue to remain in the horrific position that they are in, right? We tell you that no, as black parents, we don't want that on a very intrinsic personal level. When they talk about personal opportunities for children, we will tell you that as a black parent, our move propagates better opportunities for children, right? So we're telling you that in their context, all the harms remain. In our context, even if these harms are going to come out, which are going to clash, we tell you that there are certain opportunities which take away from that and therefore could possibly lead to a future reintegration, which is the aim of this side of the house, right? Having established that, Mr. Speaker, what is our context that we set this debate in, right? Mr. Speaker, historically, or Madam Speaker, historically, we understand that yes, post-Civil War, there was a sort of tokenistic reintegration that happened, but when the rebuilding process actually took place, democratic parties essentially gained power in the South all over again, and they've enacted horrific laws like the Jim Crow laws, which do not allow whites into public spaces, do not allow, blacks into certain public spaces, and thus restrict blacks to a large section, right? It means that the Civil War and the culmination of all those efforts has merely been tokenistic. Let me tell you that this presidency of Franklin D. Roosevelt has significantly noticed a change. Why specifically Franklin D. Roosevelt? Mr. Speaker, we'll understand how he came to power, right? He came to power with elective coalitions, very included black people into his coalition, very legitimately took what their views were into consideration, right? We tell you that like he passed the minimum wage bill, which now also necessarily mandates minimum wage for black people and white people at the same level. We tell you that Franklin D. Roosevelt has to a large extent been a propagator of equality, and we tell you that Eisenhower has done nothing more than take it over from there, right? We tell you that Eisenhower has taken blacks and whites on an equal level in the military context, right? He's treated black and white soldiers on the same plane. We tell you that how it's come out the base of the Republican Party has made this a national issue, that the culmination of this like civil war has merely been tokenistic, and the Republican Party has sought to challenge that and put up this idea that no, black people actually do deserve equality and it cannot remain a tokenistic measure any longer, right? We tell you that black people numerically too have gained a lot of social and political capital, as we've explained via FDR and Eisenhower's policy being targeted towards them. We tell you that it was this capital which essentially brought out a targeted movement, which the case that we're talking about, which is Brown versus Board of Education, brought about this radical change which actually accepted that segregation cannot accept. It means that while on the South they remain an entrenched society, on a national scale when you look at it, blacks are being propagated. Equality is actually being considered a legitimate idea, and therefore we tell you that this movement does necessarily have support, and therefore we tell you that this mindset they're talking about doesn't exist because blacks have fought for this, because we have legitimately achieved these changes, right? And we should not stop at that. This represents a great movement forward in our efforts, and therefore we cannot let it remain tokenistic any longer, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we're going to do it in two different contexts. Right? We're going to do it from a perspective of a black parent, for personally the child in himself, as well as on a social context and for the context of the movement. Since they focused on the child itself, let's talk about the child. And Mr. Speaker, in Arkansas especially, we understand that white people necessarily hate black people, that this sort of violence that they talk about does exist today, that policemen randomly still shoot black kids and get away with it because nothing happens about it, that the violence and the risk that they're talking about exists in status quo, it does not get magnified in our move, it remains the same because it exists currently as well, right? We're telling you this opportunity that these schools that black people are sent to are necessarily inferior, right? Because they're segregated schools and because white people hate black people, they do not give the same amount of resources towards these black schools, and the teachers which are put into these black schools are not the same. They're necessarily a low quality of teachers, and therefore the life opportunities which they're talking about in this context are fucking bleak for black people because we don't get access to opportunity at all. Mr. Speaker, this move on the part of this institution represents giving us a chance to access the same opportunities. Mr. Speaker, from the perspective of a parent for a child, it means that a child can now study at the same level as a white child. It means that our education is now equalized, and education is the greatest mobilizer because it gives us access to so many different things. It gives us access to a rational thought, it gives us access to further college education opportunities, it gives us access to the white collar jobs which we have been crying for centuries. Mr. Speaker, education is the greatest mobilizer, and you cannot just run away and say, ye hoga hi nahi, isliye badla, this is a bad idea. We tell you that that's not how you can run this debate with. Further, Mr. Speaker, they told you that this integration will not happen. We tell you that no integration will necessarily happen, right? And let's understand how integration happens. We're not talking about the context of educating adults or like higher teenage adults who have already formed some sort of political thought, right? We're talking about kids who have nascent political thought which has so far been influenced by only one form of discourse, right? Now if you put a white kid and a black kid in the same school, right, it's not going to be scared of the gun because he's going to have a gun on his side if in case the governor actually comes through with his idea, right? What it's going to necessarily be is him seeing the black person at the same level. It's him seeing me and a black dude sitting on the same bench and studying the same things, responding equally to the teacher and understanding things equally. It's essentially going to lessen the demonization that happens and humanize these black people for us, right? We tell you that white people are not going to do this overnight. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, this is a this is a change which will take a sufficient amount of time, and therefore we tell you that this is on a larger board better for us. Question? No question. Alright, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, what we told you that kids are still susceptible to change in the political thought as of now, right? And the greatest equalizer can be seeing him sitting next to you, doing the same things as you do, and then questioning why he's so different, why he's so demonized after all, Mr. Speaker. We tell you that this is going to be the greatest mobilizer. But in terms of a movement, Madam Speaker, what does this represent? In terms of a movement, this represents what we have so far been denied for the largest time, and institutional motherfucking support. We now have a legitimate president promising to bring in the Marines to support something which is for our equality. Mr. Speaker, what this shows is on two planes, right? If we do accept this and if we do actually volunteer, it shows that we actually have agency of choice which has been denied to us so far because we've been limited to one school. Therefore, now we exercise our agency of choice, which is good for black people's rights. But further, Mr. Speaker, this is the time for us to collectivize and acknowledge responsibility that the government has taken a step for us. And if we do not take a step with them, we are essentially going to fall behind, and situations get so bad that we won't even get segregated schools any longer. Mr. Speaker, this will necessarily represent an attitude of the black movement that they accept that they have been oppressed, and they now accept the institution's operation or institution's efforts to change this oppression, and therefore they will take part in this. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, it will appear as if we are now afraid to engage at all. It will now appear that we have accepted this dehumanization. We have accepted this horrific distribution of rights, and we basically essentially tell the white people, "Jo ho raha hai, sab chill hai. I will accept this." And therefore, Mr. Speaker, for all these reasons, we believe we are very, very proud to.
Madam Speaker, multiple rebuttals, right? The first one, that multiple rebuttals to what Bakshi said. First of all, that the social context and the social times are changing and the trends are different. Madam Speaker, we have completely failed to understand the geographical concept of where we are debating right now. Right? It's not United States of America, it's specifically Arkansas. The popularly elected governor of a conservative society has promised to use force, like the state armed forces, to ensure that the practices which go on, that is the discrimination of the blacks, continues, right? Madam Speaker, so we tell you that the paper changes and the paper legislations which might have been brought about by the federal government fail to have as much impact in Arkansas because of the societal mindset which is currently persistent, right? And they can't come here and clash with the fact that, you know what, oh, it's just the governor and the people of the society do not believe in it, because the mandate of the governor and the popular support that he is getting for this sort of a particular move is the reason that he has agreed to take such a drastic measure, right? If he knew and if he thought that I wouldn't have the support of the majoritarian white society in this particular geographical location, then he wouldn't have gone ahead and taken such a radical move to militarily oppose the federal government, right? Madam Speaker, we tell you that the magnitude of this sort of an act shows to you that all the paper legislations that they might have talked about are well and good, but on ground, the changes and the way in which blacks are viewed by the state of Arkansas and by the people of the state of Arkansas are still as bad as civil war. Madam Speaker, the idea of opportunities that the children gets, right, about how education is the greatest equalizer, we agree, except what is the goal of education? Do you believe this side of the house has had this simplistic idea of education that the moment you study in the same schools and the same classrooms and under the same teachers that white people are studying with, you will suddenly have the same quality of education, right? Except they won't, because the sort of discrimination that the white teacher in the school does in the classroom is something that will still be prevalent, right? If the white teacher does not give me equal marks as a black kid, despite me having been brilliant in the test more than the white kids, I'll feel bad about myself, right? My life chances reduce there when I see that despite my obvious merit, I am being discriminated against because of this one white teacher, right? We tell you that the psychological impact also needs to be factored in the sort of education that you are getting, right? If in school you are being vilified by your white students and making fun of, and your class teacher in the class is openly calling you a nigger and your classmates are laughing on you because of that, we tell you that the sort of psychological impact that the child faces, he will not be able to have a better schooling. So what is the trade-off here, right? You go to a school which is specifically for the blacks, where you can feel at home, where whatever you study at least you can absorb because you're feeling comfortable, right? Instead, being in a better school, being with a better teacher, except who fucks with your mind every day of the week and tells you that you're a bad person, right? We tell you that is not the sort of education that I as a black parent will want for my child, because he'll mentally break down at some point of time and realize that he's good for nothing. With Madam Speaker, another rebuttal, right? The risk, they see that risk exists in status quo, and in our side of the house it does not get magnified, except it does, right? And see what is happening in Kashmir, the fact that military is there to oppose Pakistani militants, except Kashmiris feel ostracized because of the fact that the government of the day, which is the Indian government, has guns pointed at Kashmiri people, even if it is for the protection of somebody else, is the reason for ostracization, right? The fact that the federal government is pointing guns at white people, even if it is for the protection of black people, tells us that the federal government is against us. And what happens through that, right? Vilification by association. What is this idea? The fact that governor of Arkansas hates the federal government, and by juxtaposing, you can understand that the people of Arkansas also hate the federal government. This particular move to vilify them, you understand that the moment guns are being pointed at you for the protection of black people, the idea and the visibility of the guns, right? Which is where the idea of this being a daily life, right? School is something which is regular for people, which people go to every day, and everyone is visible. The moment Marines with their guns are sitting with me in buses, are sitting with me in classrooms, what do white people see? That guns are there to be used against us, right? And Fika, we tell you that is where they start hating the black people even further, and the risk which they believe is something which exists in status quo is something that gets exacerbated. Yes, Dr. What is it?
So don't you think that the context where white people hate black people, anyway, the guns of the federal government are now pointed at them, that acts as sort of deterrence for them to not work?
Sit short. So, what is the sort of deterrence that you're talking about? The only deterrence that you have is that you will be protected from physical violence during school hours while you're on the bus. When Iyer comes and asks you, what about the sort of violence that you will face at other points of time? What about the moment you graduate from school and people, and this is high school, right? So 2 years when you graduate, what happens after 2 years when you don't have that sort of protection with you? And what happens when people target you then? What guns will protect you? The
is something which is extremely temporary and short term. So we believe that this idea of deterrence is something which is incomplete. So unless they come and say that they will provide, protection to this black person for the rest of his life, the idea of deterrence falls.
Madam Speaker, the next rebuttal, right? Yeah, this idea that we must work with the government and we must trade with this and we must shake hands with them because we want to be empowered. It's ridiculous, right? Because as a black parent, I will only partake into that move if I believe it will be successful in the long run. Considering for the last 30 or 40 years, irrespective of all the paper legislations as they complete and they kill themselves in this, right? The fact that all the paper legislations have been passed, the fact that such tokenistic measures have still been there, and still the governor of my home state, in which me and my child has to live for the rest of their life, is opposing me with guns and grenades, shows the fact that the paper legislations don't work. The fact that this move by the federal government, in my mind at least, because I'm a layman, right? I have been living in this particular society for 30 or 40 years. They have given us absolutely no analysis as to why, as a black layman in 1952 who has felt socially ostracized for so long, will have this idea that just because of guns being present with my child for the next 2 years while he's in school, there'll be a social upsurge and suddenly blacks will be equal to whites. And Sika, we tell you that in that sort of a scenario, a black parent will not be willing to go ahead with a white, with the government's move if they believe it endangers their child. And Sika, they have completely failed to recognize who the biggest stakeholder in this debate is, right? It is that black kid. His life chances reduce. How does it reduce? We tell you that all the companies, all the industries in Arkansas are owned by white people. All the job, all the employment is provided by white people. So the moment I go ahead and entrench the idea of hatred of black people in them even further, and the reason it gets entrenched is because they now believe that my child, as a white parent, my child is sitting in a classroom with guns because of black people. I now start hating black people naturally more, right? Because I believe that if they hadn't existed, if they hadn't been in the same schools as mine, if they hadn't had the sort of education that my child is getting, then at least he'd be away from guns. We tell you that this visibility of a marine soldier, this visibility of violence around my child is something which will make me blame the the black community and the black people for that sort of a possibility of a violence, right? We tell you that is why a white job provider, a white person who's in a position of power will hate black people more and will be less willing to give jobs and give life opportunities to black person who we might have able to earn here. And that is why we believe that we are very, very proud to finish.
It's done. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, let me start by saying that we agree with their characterization of Arkansas, right? And the fact that Orwell Forbes is going ahead and doing this. But Mr. Speaker, that is what we need to understand. The fact that there exists this sort of schism between Orwell Forbes and the federal government is something that is very interesting in the context of the Black Rights Movement. The fact, Mr. Speaker, that a white president of a party that gets so much support from across so many white states, with so many other white Americans supporting it, coming out and saying that we will be forcibly integrate Little Rock High School has a sort of impact which they cannot negate. And the question that arises in the minds not just of the people of Arkansas but of many other white citizens living in other parts of the state is that what is this thing that makes us adopt a necessarily differential standard in the way we treat black people from our compatriots in Washington DC and in New York, right? And that is something that they have not understood, Mr. Speaker. The fact that this is at the end of the day the United States of America, and the fact that these questions will be asked when they see this necessarily differential standard existing, right? Secondly, Mr. Speaker, let's understand why the idea of federal government support is important, right? Because this is the first time black people are receiving governmental institutional support for them to go ahead and storm a public space which was hitherto reserved only for white people, right? And why does this institutional support achieve importance, right? Number one, again, because of the optics of this sort of thing, right? The popularization of the fact that white people are with black people in their struggle to integrate, Little Rock High School, the sort of imagery when it goes out in newspapers and television. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the idea that this sort of white people and black people necessarily always having differential standards is not something all Americans agree to, right? And this is not the sort of narrative that an Orwell Forbes can continue to integrate. Further interesting point, Mr. Speaker, is what is the power of the President of the United States with respect to the National Guard in respect to something like this? We believe, Mr. Speaker, that it is interesting to note President Eisenhower's proclamation with regard to this, because we need to remember that as per the Constitution of the United States and as per the statements he has made, his promise to nationalize the Arkansas National Guard, to federalize it and make them disperse if there is any possibility of this sort of thing happening, right, Mr. Speaker? The power to do that exists with the president, and we believe that the president has shown enough political will by the sort of messages sent out to show that if necessary he will take steps against Orwell Forbes and his law enforcement. They cannot argue it in a constitutionally and historically illiterate context, and they need to deal with the power of the president and the political will shown by Eisenhower if they have to go ahead and do that. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, on the idea of how a white teacher will continue to like make a black kid feel necessarily bad, right? And how a white kid and how this discrimination keeps on getting perpetuated. Except, Mr. Speaker, we believe that once this discrimination happens in a classroom where white kids and black kids are sitting together, the sort of popularization of the nuanced and deep-seated discrimination that exists in society will get further traction. The fact is right now, Mr. Speaker, white people and black people and how necessarily white people view black people differently don't come out and form part of public discourse because they never interact, right? We believe that the problem in this sort of thing can be solved by having more black teachers in schools and by the federal government playing a role in that and making sure that that sort of thing happens. But this sort of situation where you show that white people and black people necessarily enjoy differential standards in society when placed in the same position, right? And the sort of optics again resulting from that is something that they need to contest from that side of the house. When we clearly tell you that this will necessarily popularize the idea that yes, for centuries we have ghettoized these people and right now we cannot continue to do so. This sort of perpetuation of the same attitudes is not okay, right? The mere popularization of this idea is important and they need to deal with that later on. Okay, thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the idea of deterrence is the idea of deterrence and what they have told us like simply that what happens after high school and what about the fact is this, Mr. Speaker, what is the intrinsic value to the federal government supporting a black person, right? And this is something we have already spoken to you about. It is not okay for them to come ahead and simply say what happens after high school. We will talk to you that what happens after high school is something that's necessarily on our side because we tell you that educational standards and opportunities enjoyed in a better public school is something that will necessarily make the quality of their life better, right? And that's something we'll come to in our constructive. Fourthly, Mr. Speaker, the idea that paper legislation won't work and hasn't worked historically is again a historically illiterate argument to make because we need to look at the sort of change that was brought about by FDR through the New Deal, right? In the context of the black movement and what that meant in terms of things like trade unions and what that meant in terms of things like black entrepreneurship in the United States of America and how that gave blacks an access point to actually participate in public life and in economic life in the United States of America. For them to say that no social capital has resulted from the moves of FDR and from the decisions of the Supreme Court in this regard and that black people like right now are in exactly the same sort of situation as the Southern Reconstruction period is again historically illiterate, right? Now, Mr. Speaker, what is the idea that Ananya Kumar came and spoke about the life chances of the black kid? We tell you why the prioritization of a black parent in this regard will necessarily be for education, right? Because we believe that, Mr. Speaker, what has historically happened is that a black kid has got perpetuated in this cycle whereby he enjoys poor schooling, then goes become a manual laborer and never receives the same opportunities as a white kid, right? We believe necessarily that when a parent knows that at the end of it all, his kid will be digging ditches at the age of 30 and will die of alcoholism and poverty at the age of 40 is not something that plays positively on their mind, right? This is where the idea of them prioritizing better education for their kids comes in, right, Mr. Speaker? And the idea that this will lead to some sort of change for them coming ahead and saying that no, white people will still control all sources of employment is something that they clash with completely, Mr. Speaker, because we believe that the sort of political and social capital you gain from mere engagement with education is an idea that they need to contend with, right? That, Mr. Speaker, that for years nobody has asked any questions about black schools, nobody has asked any questions about the quality of education they receive and what are the skills that they receive in education in public schools by white kids and why this change exists and why this differential exists is something that they need to answer on this side of the house and something that they haven't dealt with at all. Now, lastly, Mr. Speaker, what is this idea of the safety of the black kid, right? And we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that the safety of the black kid is something that falls squarely on our side because we believe in the sort of law enforcement situation that exists, their life chances are pretty tough anyway, right? State law enforcement is against them anyway. People are pointing guns at them all the time anyway, right? And they can just be shot on the streets merely because they are black all the time anyway. Except the only difference right now, Mr. Speaker, for the first time they're receiving some sort of institutional support to not live within their shell of fear and to come out and go ahead and do something and try to be greater than what they have historically been, right, Mr. Speaker? And we believe that there is an inherent value to this sort of institutional support, right? And they can't simply say that this cycle will keep on getting perpetuated, even if an access point has been given to them to try and break out of it. We believe that for
Madam Speaker, inherent contradiction in their case when they come here and say that we agree with the social contextualization that you give to us, that black people think of themselves as inferior to white people think of black people as turds, but then the next second point they come here, that this new deal of Marine Corps will suddenly empower you and make you feel that you're better than everyone else. We believe there has been inherent contradiction with the sort of contextualization that we've given. Three questions that you need to ask yourself in this debate. One is this idea, how do any social movement or any social change occurs? Secondly, this idea as to why will a black parent make this decision? And secondly, why will necessarily a social impasse be created and no form of changes can be brought about? To the first question of how does any form of social change happen, right? To this there is twofold idea, right? One, we believe that any form of social movement works on the plans of creating shock values, creating protests at the level of public, right? We think that the public level is something where you try to create that protest, but when it comes to the daily routine of life, you want all of those changes to be externally manifested into your lives, right? So we believe that there is an inherent distinction when you sort of protest against the white people on the roads, when you sort of protest against them with the sort of treatment that they give to you on the roads, but when it comes to your daily routines of life, as to when you are sitting with those people, how does it necessarily create a social impasse? Because we believe that the very moment you have Marine Corps sitting next to you, it creates a form of social discomfort, not just for the white person, but also for the black person, right? We believe that private manifestation of the sort of changes that you can bring about on the public levels will never come about because of the social impasse and social discomfort that you've created, right? Two responses on how the psychological impact will be for the white people and for a biased white person and for a moderate white person. On the level of a biased white person who already thinks that this person is a turd, will think that this guy was the person who used to clean my farms a decade, like some years back, and he's now moving around with Marine Corps around me, threatening me. This is what creates a sort of resentment, right? We believe that these Marine Corps in themselves further re-entrenches this idea as to why this person who was lower to me now is the one who's threatening me. It doesn't necessarily create a deterrence effect, but it tells these people and creates this form of resentment because this bias and prejudice exists in his mind. This idea that the black person is less to him still exists in his mind. Secondly, on the level of a moderate white, right? Why does this level of social discomfort arises? Because even if a person wants to go ahead and make and talk to these people, we think that these sort of things within a schooling environment creates a form of vacuum between the two people, right? The two sort of people who have different ideas about life, who have different ideas about how they are being treated, cannot necessarily be solved if this sort of sword is kept on the head of the black person and the white person. We think there was a burden on their side as to tell as to why this white person sitting next to the black person would necessarily engage with it. When Bakshi just comes here and both Shorjo come here, that engagement will happen. We don't tell you any form of engagement can happen when this sort of like fear and resentment exists and perpetuates into the minds of the people, right? Secondly, we come here and talk to you this idea as to why a black parent should necessarily make the right decision for his son, right? We think they come here and tell you that education is something which mobilizes people, except we tell you that the sort of education that they are getting is also where the teacher treats them as a slave, right? Where the teacher also has that bias and the prejudice existing in his mind, right? We think with the sort of thing that a black parent would want is that less of bodily injuries or conflicts or psychological impact shall be created, right? We don't think a black parent would necessarily put this entire burden of creating the social change for a black movement on his son, because his priorities as a parent is something that this son should effectively not face the fear when he enters into the classroom. He's not treated like a slave, that jokes are not cracked upon him, he's not humiliated and embarrassed at every second of his life into the class, right? We don't think they have done any sort of justice on that side of the house to tell us why this education will suddenly become better when there'll be two Marine Corps, when there'll be this other person who'll still see this person as someone who's outsider, as someone who's like existing, because we think that in the classroom there necessarily need to exist a certain form of peaceful schooling environment, right? We think that this sort of schooling environment doesn't exist when these Marine Corps are there because of the sort of resentment that is created. We think that impacts both in the minds of the teacher, in the minds of the students, and in the minds of all these biased people, right? We think that on the count of telling us as to why a black parent should necessarily make this change, the only thing that we have got got from their side is, look, he wants them to succeed in life. Except we tell you that the sort of judgment that he'll make is that within this existing framework, why should my son get the best job? Or why should the sort of education that he's getting, with that sort of education, how can he do great things in his life, right? We don't think that this sudden idea of making a social change will necessarily be a decision of the black parent, and that is something which has to be one of the most important metric for you to judge this debate. Thirdly comes this idea as to what will be and how will a social impact, social movement and social impasse be created, right? We think at the very outset, as a side, we do not tell you that social movement should not be launched, protest should not be there. But what we really tell you is that this method of protest or this method of social movement is something which is inherently wrong, because it contradicts to the sort of narrative that you want to run, right? What is this narrative that you want to run? Is that on the level you want to show what kind of atrocities are being done, and not like create resentment, because it takes away the opportunity of any kind of social integration that can happen in a coming decade or in the next 2 decades, right? We think they haven't even talked about us, any of it, as to how this plank will be fulfilled when you sort of perpetuate and you start mobilizing this form of social movement on lines of fear and resentment, and why this will necessarily create a bad opportunity both for the blacks and for the whites, right? Thirdly, on this line of why a social impasse will be created, right? We think that this idea that necessarily comes to play is the sort of visibility that comes into play when these Marine Corps are there, right? We think both Iyer and Kumar have done justice to this debate when they come here and ask you as to what will these black people do when they're outside this. To which Shorter says that there is a scale, there is a division between the state government and the federal government, to which the simple answer is that on paper laws are not the only thing on which a social movement is dependent on. Symbolically level as to how effective it is at the grassroots level becomes one of the most important criteria to decide whether that social movement is at all complete or not, right? We don't think that this only statement from Shorter that there is a schism and now that the compatriots will see that this will be a sort of engagement is completely bad, right? At the end of this debate, I can only ask you to make certain metrics for this debate. One, as to this idea whether necessarily 2 cops existing in a school affects the mindset of a white person who's already entrenched with this idea of prejudice or bias. Secondly, to this idea as to why will a black parent necessarily make a decision and why will not a social impasse be created. On all of these lines, I think I've won this debate.
Thanks, I now try to
Mr. Speaker, I'll start with a couple of rebuttals and then move to the important questions in this debate, right? First, and the only thing which came about throughout the speech was one, there'll be not enough engagement because there'll be a sword which will be lying on my throat, and hence I would be disincentivized and I would further start hating the other person, right? We give you multiple responses to that. We tell you by the simple fact that now people will see a white Marine protecting a black child who's chosen to come and sit here. There'll be automatic questions which will be asked on both sides, both on the sides of black people towards showing the fact that there is a white person who is doing this to save that particular person, and the fact that the white person now sees a white person protecting that black child, right? In the second context, we tell you, Mr. Speaker, they totally fail to engage with the context which we have provided, right? And the simple response to the entire context of how progressive the black movement has been, that these are only paper cheap. We tell you, Mr. Speaker, we cannot run away with the entire characterization which has come throughout with the progress of the movement in the black generally, and the progressive moves we have received, and the context in which we are debating this particular motion. But more on that later. And secondly, more importantly, a rebuttal with respect to, when you talk about the educational opportunities, they say that these educational opportunities would not necessarily be same because there will be discrimination among these particular children. That is based on a simplistic assumption that when we are talking about integration, there will be all white teachers teaching those particular kids together, right? The idea that there can be black teachers is something which they haven't considered, but that's very simplistic. On a second and a more nuanced level, Mr. Speaker, we tell you, maybe when they're sitting in the class, initially on the first day, second day, there is hatred. But the subsequent fact that when they start playing together, when they start playing basketball, and when they realize that, oh, there is this black kid who also can shoot great hoops and can score better goals and is a fast runner, when they start mutually engaging in that sort of an environment, not just in terms of academics or studies, but extra going out in terms of there being proms or there being festivals and there being extracurricular activities in terms of sports, this engagement necessarily happens, and the kind of integration through this educational means will necessarily something which will happen to a greater extent now, because now this white person who has simply till now been only has given one side of the narrative, which was through his parents or people who hated these black particular people, and that's the entire idea behind doing away
with segregation, right? Because there needs to be more engagement, because now the white people only have one side of the story. The very fact that they now see that the same child who can play brilliant basketball is not in any way inferior to me, but rather like in certain instances it can be like beautifully like talented. In second, Mr. Speaker, when they sit and interact with these particular people over time, as we tell you, Mr. Speaker, that is something they'll realize and start questioning what sort of a narrative they have been fed, right? Mr. Speaker, and that is something which is far likelier to happen in a school than when you place these adults in these people in the adult life where there is necessary like oppression and like say sort of animosity which exists, and that is precisely why this move is more important in terms of segregation, segregation on the like school. Now let's go to the most important question. One is like the recontextualization of this motion and how they haven't like engaged and totally forgotten about like what we have told you. Second, what are the considerations of the black parent which they made like a primary point about and which I'll deal with. And third, what is the possibility of this move to succeed? In terms of recontextualization, throughout Bakshi's speech, when he gave you examples of this being the first of incident when there is an institutional support which comes our way, the fact that FDR, like Franklin D. Roosevelt, devoted his entire life to work for me, the entire geographical setting. When we say that we agree with the geographical setup and social setup of Arkansas, we also told you this has to be considered in the larger set of United States of America, where there has been far more mobilization and political capital generated over time in furtherance of the black movement. Now the fact that now I am a parent whose child will live in Arkansas and I live in Arkansas, will also take into account why like how my relatives or how people I know in other states are doing so well, how their children who go to their schools and have been opposed to like say different sort of opportunities, and that those are the sort of considerations which I will have right now, right? And I will start questioning that if the entire nation can do it, why the fuck these people think and how do they think they're so entitled in the light of the context which we are debating in this particular motion? And secondly, the fact that this particular judgment just came about, which acts as a trigger of sorts to us being more assertive to the right. And as a black parent, Mr. Speaker, which is the second question of this debate, we tell you, people who have been associated with the black movement over time, the black movement is as personal to them as like, the priority is not like as personal to the priority child, but the simple fact because they've been oppressed, and this idea of collectivization that I associate with my race, the very fact that I will be oppressed and I will also, while taking into account my child's best interest, would also balance it out with the interest of my black community and the fact that like my relatives or like my uncle died because of like some white douchebag just like shooting him up because he like killed his pig or something like that, right? Mr. Speaker, we tell you in that context, the psyche of the black parent is very important, we tell you. And on second ground, we tell you, which has been like the life choice of this particular people, which is the educational interest. We tell you, necessarily, when you send a black person to white, like school fund, where funds are necessarily greater, where like there have been more attention paid, the quality is nice, and this particular person now gets a chance to break through the cycle, which we spoke to you about. Otherwise, what they talk to you in the status quo, it talks about the internalization of like the fact that I'll go to a poor grade school, I'll end up working like as a manual laborer, and there is no possibility for me to break through this. I will take you in that context, Mr. Speaker, I tell you, this is very primarily important for a black person, parent, to also talk about, like, consider his parents' dinner and the idea of black collectivization. The fact that the state has given me an option and I chose to refuse it will be a setback to the entire black movement which we like came across, right? When the president extended you a hand and you said, no bro, I'm too afraid to like take it, just think about the kind of like setback that gives to the black movement. And that is also something a black parent who's a layman who has lived in the oppressive society and now knows about the geographical larger construct in which he lives will also take into account. But before that, yes.
I have one more point of engagement. If a white child who earlier also knew that black people were in a pathetic situation and didn't know anything about it then, why please suddenly like realize that
and that's the problem with their side. They don't realize that the things are changing, and that's what we contextualize this debate to be. They didn't engage with us on at all, and that is why they lose this debate. But thirdly, let me talk about the possibility of this integration, right? First, let's ask ourselves, do we have greater social political capital? Yes, we do. Do we have like first of its kind institutional support? Yes, we do. Do we have an access point which we never did? Yes, we do. And should we take it? Yes. This is the point where we need to make the change and make like our kids and provide them with a better opportunity and a chance to break through the cycle which we or my grandfather could not break out of, right? The idea that the black parent will now consider that there is one possibility with the extension of the state support, changing mechanism, changing context, which they haven't engaged with at all. Mr. Speaker, we tell you that black parent is bound to make a choice which is beneficial for the kid, right? And like the black community, which it is benefiting generally, which they haven't seemed to engage with us at all. Mr. Speaker, thirdly, we can talk to you about this entire idea of like this person being put a kinship between white and like black people, right? In that sense, when I gave you the example of like a marine protecting a white person and there being like large network support throughout the country of the United States of America, in this particular regard, we tell you a black parent is all the more motivating, and the mindset in which we are debating right now is all the more in favor of and volunteering his child to the student and giving his support to the black movement and to the benefit of his child. And for all these reasons, we are very proud of this.
Mr. Speaker, before I ask you to consider the important questions of this debate, I'll point out certain whip dumps which came in Vinayak's speech, right? The first one, that now white Marines protecting black dudes will be seen as something which is like good, right? We tell you that that is an idea which is like, firstly, which is ridiculous because you don't know if the Marine is white or not, but more importantly, when you don't give us a chance to clash with it and say it only in the whip speech, I think it's blatantly unfair. And secondly, this idea that now this particular dude will prioritize race as much as child, and that too without analysis, is again something which came in whip speech, because they say that, you know what, the black parent's priority will be as much with the race which he has so much, like, I don't know, harmony with, as much as his child, which we have clashed with, because like any parent's first priority is something which their child is and the welfare of that child, and secondly, again, a whip dump, right? Madam Speaker, what are the important questions which we believe are like two simple questions that should win us the debate, right? First one, and which is the most important stakeholder in this motion, right? What will be the impact on that particular black kid, because the house is the parent after all? And secondly, and this is an ancillary question, that what will it be the effect on the movement, which I really don't care about on the same level as like my child, right? So the first question, right, the impact on the black kid, their only case has been that, you know what, as a black parent, I'll be worried about the equal life opportunities that my child will get in this particular school, and then they say that, you know what, you've given us no model on how to improve the education. We don't believe that our burden was to come here and tell you that how to improve the education in those segregated schools. Our burden was to come here and tell you that the sort of education that you'll get, even if you enforce these people to like forcibly integrate into these so-called white schools, is something which will be something which is like, you know, up like of a good standard and will give you good life chances. And they said that, you know what, all like teachers are not white. Even if that is not true, most of them are, and most of the kids in those schools and all the white kids in those schools will still discriminate against that particular guy, because they realize that, you know what, this guy has two big like hulky men with guns sitting around him, and like why will, and suddenly this idea of basketball, right? And so we ask you that why will that access point be created in the first place, wherein the white children are now ready to accept this black kid and be willing to play basketball with him, when they realize that he's being given a differential treatment, and he has people with guns with him so that we don't hurt him. I don't know why, and they gave no analysis as to why the white people in that school will now suddenly be willing to play basketball with that black kid when they see the federal protection in terms of guns around him. Madam Speaker, now this idea of like state of like how the changes are happening in the country and how we must go hand in hand in that, and how that lets my child have better life opportunities. Madam Speaker, we clash with you on this and tell you that ideas of re-entrenchment which already exist in minds of white parents who control the state mechanism in Arkansas and are already extremely conservative towards the idea of like black and white equality is something which gets re-entrenched further. And the idea of shock value which like Shorjo picks up on, right? The shock value in this case is in public life. The moment, and this is what he clarified, the moment you transfer that shock value to something which is as integral to me and my child as like his private life and like school, right? We tell you that shock value turns into hatred. The shock of the fact that like my child is in the same classroom with people with two guns because of this black child is something which will make us hate more. And that, Madam Speaker, is why we tell you that the ideas of biases which are already prevalent will further get re-entrenched, and the danger which is already faced by black people in status quo will be furthered, because you can't guarantee them 24/7 protection. Madam Speaker, the idea of what happens to the movement, right, which is the only thing that they have concerned about. Firstly, as the context I clarified, I have no idea whether the movement will be successful or not. So if I partake into this, I will be taking a gamble as to with like the risk on the life of my child and his life opportunities in future, because he will not be given life opportunities by white people who hate him even more now. And like what are the stakes, right? The stake that this movement might be successful, even though that hasn't happened in the state of Arkansas over the past 50 years, even when the federal government has been with us, right? The very fact that the governor is still willing to use state force to ensure that his like move is something which is still relevant. We tell you that this black parent, as a layman, I have absolutely no idea as to why this movement, which hasn't been successful in the past, and we still have a governor of this sort, will now suddenly be successful because Marines are coming in. And we tell you that considering the fact that I have no guarantee that this movement will be successful, I will not be willing to stake the life of my child in this gamble, and that is why we leave on the day of this debate.